Good afternoon. Is it on? Did we turn it on? We have to turn it on. Here we go. Good afternoon. If everyone could come in and take their seats. If everyone can come in and take their seats. Good afternoon. My name is Burgess Harrison, Executive Director of the National Minority Health Association. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to be here with our, I'll call it our first, because we certainly hope to have many more, but this is our first Lupus Call to Action Day here at NYU Langone Health, and we're very thankful for the opportunity to assemble all of you here, and also in particular, hear and understand and feel the patient journey relative to lupus. So with that, I want to call on Donna Finale, who looks like she was running away from me, but I'd like to call on Donna Finale to come to take the next step of this. But before I do that, I also want to thank all of our partners. So we have the Global Healthy Living Foundation, and we also have BDO, which is blackdoctors.org. We have Health First, Aurinia Pharmaceuticals, Biogen, Lupus Research Foundation, and the National Minority Health Association, and I think I mentioned Biogen as well. So I'm sorry, and UCB Life Sciences. So I apologize. I'm going to pay for that one later. But thank you all for being here. It really is an important day for us and for the lupus community to come together and raise awareness of this the important challenges that patients face. So with that, I want to welcome Donna Finale.
Thank you, Burgess, very much. I will get you later for that one, but I'm just kidding. So again, thank you so much for being here today. We are so proud of this event and the work that our partners have done to make this event happen, the lupus community in general. This day is dedicated to everyone living with lupus in the lupus community. So everybody living with lupus, their caregivers, their healthcare providers, and everyone that loves somebody with lupus. So first off, I'm Donna Finale. I am head of sustainability and health equity at UCB. I'm going to be your, I don't know if it's MC, runner, whatever it is, but I'm going to try to make sure we get the people to the stage so that you can hear from them. We have a great day planned, but before we get into that, I just want to give you a quick 2-second story if that's possible. So I have had experiences in my life where there is tremendous issues accessing healthcare. And it's the reason we're here today is because we need to not just bring awareness, but bring a call to action so that we can change some of the barriers or overcome some of the barriers that people living with lupus face. And one of the huge barriers is accessing care, accessing the medications, accessing what they need, giving them the best opportunity and equitable opportunity to be well. So in my life, one of the most challenging things I've faced is my mother is from Puerto Rico. She moved here when she was in elementary school, and at a very young age of 62, she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, or that's what we thought it was in the beginning. But my point is, I've spent 22 years in healthcare. I have so many connections with physicians and doctors and hospitals. New York was my area. That's where I grew up. I was a sales rep here 22 years ago, and I thought I knew a lot about healthcare. It took me and my dad and my brothers and my sister over 1 year to be able to get her to the specialist she needed for her care. So with all that I know, it took a year, and in that time, we felt helpless and hopeless and overwhelmed. I cannot even imagine what it's like for the average person living with lupus to try to get to their providers and get the care and the services they need, especially when sometimes different insurances create barriers. So with that being said, we're going to move to our journey today over the next couple hours. So we are going to hear some real world stories from people living with lupus. We are going to hear a patient journey, much like we're trying to overcome some of the barriers. We're going to hear what those barriers are from her perspective, Yvonne. We're going to hear from a celebrity. We're going to hear from a council member, all living with lupus and going to share their journey. We are going to get an overview of lupus and new lupus nephritis. We're going to hear from some of the top thought leaders here in New York City and actually in the United States about lupus and lupus nephritis. And we are going to emphasize the importance of being able to access care and getting early diagnosis. And we're also going to share some of the best practices from these experts. So quick run through. We are going to have, as we mentioned, the current state of lupus from Dr. Bayan right here at NYU. We're going to be bringing her up in a couple seconds. You can start making your way to the stage. We are going to hear from some of the groups like Health First, Lupus Research Alliance, as well as Global Healthy Living. We are going to talk to them about their mission and their challenges. We are going to have the celebrity spotlight. I know most of you are excited about hearing from Toni Braxton around her journey. And we're going to hear what else is happening. By the way, May 1st today is the kickoff of Lupus Awareness Month. So on top of just activities that will be happening on this stage, there'll be activities sponsored by LADA, LFA, LRA, all over the country that they're going to share some of those from this stage. With that being said, I mentioned that we are here to overcome some barriers. What we are looking for is we are trying to make sure that we get people living with lupus the earliest access to the specialists and the care that they need. So we are here to promote the timely access to care for all people, regardless of age, race, gender, socioeconomics, and anything else that might cause disparities. We are here to encourage primary care providers as well as ER doctors to partner with their rheumatologists, nephrologists, and others to make sure that you have protocols in place to help to make sure that the sickest patients are prioritized and they get where they need to be. And we are here to promote all patients get educated on advanced and complex therapies for lupus, as well as being offered clinical trial opportunities. So, what is a Lupus Call to Action Day? So I'm not going to read this whole thing and bore you to death, but what I am going to tell you is beyond awareness, a call to action is what needs to be done and how do we do it. So that's what we're hoping to share with you today. We're hoping that you take away some of the best practices from the experts that you're going to hear from. We're hoping that you can increase empathy as you hear the patient journeys, 3 different perspectives. And what we really want to accomplish is what we're calling equity for all. So what we mentioned before, that timely access, the encouragement of doctors and other healthcare providers to collaborate with one another to help make the journey better. But the whole idea of today is let's make it happen. Let's leave here and do things differently than we did before we came here. There we go. With that being said, I would love to bring to the stage right here from NYU, Dr. Bayan.
Right. Thank you so much. So I was charged in 5 minutes to do the state of the art, or rather the current state of lupus and Langone's hope for the future. So, we put our foot to the pedal really pretty early on when I took the lead of the division in February 2014, and our goal was to establish a full-thickness clinical and research program. And by golly, we did it. And we now have over 1,000 patients in our registry here at NYU. Now, patients are seen across the NY Superblock and Brooklyn, and this is reflected in the ethnicity and racial composition of the patients we see. And just to point out, for example, 52% of the patients seen at Bellevue are Hispanic, and 42% of the patients seen on our 23rd Street are Black. So we have a full representation, and I think we're very proud that it represents all of the different ethnicities and races in lupus, affected by lupus. And as well, the heterogeneity of lupus is well represented. We're going to hear over and over again about how there are so many different signs and symptoms of lupus. And we can see in our cohort here, kidney disease is represented by almost 50% of the patients. And that's why you'll hear a lot about lupus nephritis today. And almost all of our patients have antibodies to double-stranded DNA. So what are our missions? We want to integrate clinical and basic research. We want to educate our physicians and our patients, and we want to collaborate, which is really an important aspect of lupus. So it takes a village to actually put something like this together. I run this program with Peter Ismerly, and I have the benefit of Renee Triki, who's here today, and Mala Masson, our data manager. We incorporate all the different areas that I just told you, and as well, we partner with our basic scientists to try to bring the best bench work to the bedside. And we have a very large biorepository, and it's interesting that Bob Clancy put this registry together for us, and he now works under Anka Askinase's supervision, just showing how NYU and Columbia have so nicely been able to integrate. So what have we done with this biorepository? We currently have archived many, many samples for distribution. For example, we have 961 plasma, from which we've collected almost 4,000 individual specimens available to partner with our researcher colleagues. And for many projects, fresh samples are required, and we stand at the ready to provide the samples from the patients that may help us bring new advances to them. So what are the fruits of our labor? Well, that's really reflected by the diverse research portfolio we have, working on platelets, working on COVID. We stood at the ready during COVID and showed that patients with lupus indeed could make antibody responses to the vaccine, though some were limited by their medications. We study the gut, we study DNA, we study how to help prevent heart block, we study herpes zoster, we study advances in health. And some of the new and upcoming lupus clinical trials you see presented here today, and Amit Saxena will probably discuss some of that with you. And also to say we've kept up with pace, and like other centers, Columbia and ourselves, we're very interested in the CAR T cells and seeing where that therapy may take us. But I want to remind everyone, the future is now, and we want to educate and empower our patients. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to just show you 3 illustrations. We're providing home dipsticks so patients can actually evaluate their own urine to identify the earliest signs of kidney disease. We're empowering mothers with anti-Ro antibodies and providing them home Dopplers so they can identify the earliest signs of heart block. And led by Anka Askinase at Columbia, we're helping her to share videos so that patients can understand what it means to participate in a clinical trial. So with that, I'm really excited to set the stage for, I think, a really exciting afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bine. Whoops. Thank you, Dr. Bine. The National Minority Health Association started in 1988 initially focused on equitable prescriptions within minority and underserved communities. Today we focus on health equity in all forms, phases, and aspects across disease states and health conditions. We do a lot of collaborations with a number of organizations like those that are here today, but in addition to like the Sickle Cell Foundation, the American Kidney Fund, American Epilepsy Society, and so on. So we think that collaboration, both public, private, government, and so on, is really important to address health disparities and bring about health equity. But I'm going to use a big part of my time to call Kiana Madison, who is the artist who created, hopefully you saw the image outside, the representation of it. And she is out of Denver, and she's going to lead us in a little bit of a meditation, as we call it, and just give you a little bit of background in terms of her journey as it relates to the art and the lupus community.
So as Burgess said, my name is Kiana Madison. My pronouns are she, her. I am an artist living with invisible disabilities and chronic illnesses and have autoimmune disease that causes chronic pain and chronic fatigue. And for me, the arts has been a very powerful tool to support me in coping, but also to support partnering with organizations like the National Minority Health Association, to use art as a way to promote empathy, to increase awareness and advocacy. For this meditation, I would like everybody to just take a moment to lean back in their seat and to close their eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And I want you to imagine that you are in a beautiful garden. This garden has gorgeous purple flowers surrounding you. And as you notice yourself in this garden, I want you to see your own hand reaching out towards one of the flowers. And as you reach out, you notice a butterfly that lands on your finger. As you notice this butterfly, I want you to begin to think about the idea of transformation and begin to reflect about how do you personally want to transform the lives of people living with lupus? What does that mean to you personally? And imagine how you would like to collaborate with others that are here today to help transform the lives of people living with lupus. Take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and bring one hand over your heart. And as you breathe, think about how you can share your vision of wanting to transform lives with somebody here today that you do not know. One more breath in and out, and you may gently open your eyes. I hope that all of you in this room today, although some of you know each other, that you think about ways to connect with somebody else in this room that you don't know, to figure out ways to partner, because it can have a tremendous impact on the creativity and innovation that we can bring together to help support the lives of people living with lupus. Thank you for this time, and I look forward to conversing with many of you after this event.
I'm going to move to the side because apparently I'm not tall enough for that, but Thank you, Kiana. That was beautiful. We are going to have a little slight shift in our agenda because our council member is running a little bit late. So we will have her speak to us as soon as she arrives. With that being said, we are so excited to hear from Yvonne. So we're going to begin to bring Yvonne to the stage with her rheumatologist, the amazing Dr. Anka Askanes.
I'm Anka Askanes. I'm a rheumatologist and a lupologist. I trained here at NYU. I am now at Columbia. I'm the director of the Lupus Center at Columbia University. And I have had the privilege of knowing Yvonne for 15 years. She is here with us today to tell us about her lupus journey. And I think I have overestimated her ability to go up and down those stairs. So we'll give her a minute. So Yvonne walked into my office and in my life at our 20th Street office over a decade and a half ago. And like everything that Yvonne does, she changed my understanding of lupus, and she's here now to share with you that experience. Do you want to start with the diagnosis?
It started in late 2004. I'm so blessed and honored to be here, so thank you for having me. The diagnosis really started with pain, and a lot of times we get pain, we're like, oh, it'll go away, and that's what I thought. But I started to notice pain in my joints, pain in my feet, pain in my hands. Even when I sat down, I tried to get up, I'm in pain. And I'm thinking it's really nothing, it'll go away. So I started to go visit my regular PCP. He said to me, I think it's time for you to see someone special. I said, special, what do you mean by that? He said, you need a specialist. I think you might have something more concerning that you're dealing with. And so I did, and this was in Westchester Medical, where I did see a rheumatologist, and they just started testing me.
So in a way, that was very lucky, right? Your primary care doctor had the understanding that this could be either arthritis or lupus. So smart primary care doctor, we need to be thankful to the smart primary care doctors that help us reach out to the patients with lupus.
And at that time, it was just a series of tests that they made me go to. I think one of them was HIV. Other tests that I can't, it's been so long, it's been 19 years since I've been diagnosed. And basically, just trying to figure out what's wrong. I started to notice my lymph nodes and my neck was swelling. The lymph nodes are behind my neck, and things started to look like a reptile almost. And I was very concerned about what I was doing. I was working full time, going to school at the time, and I was married, had a child. There was a lot going on in my life, and I just wish someone would have told me when I did find out I did have lupus, what it really was. I really didn't know. I'd had a friend who happened to pass away from lupus, but I didn't know exactly how debilitating this disease was, and that this is my entire life, and this is really a disease that's incurable. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll be okay. Didn't really take it seriously, and just went by my normal routine. Never really thought about, we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. All we had was, what our doctors told us. And so that's all I went by. I didn't really have no one to tell me how serious this was.
I think you're bringing a very good point that we need to do better in educating lupus patients about the disease, about what to expect, about how to find a good rheumatologist, and how to align their goals with their rheumatologist.
Right.
Let's go forward in time.
Well, going forward, I happened to meet Anka because it got really bad. I had edema and my legs looked like elephant legs. I was in extreme pain and I didn't know what to do. And I was going to work, and a lot of the times I would have the ambulance being called because I'm in a lot of pain and I can't do my daily functions. And Anka, I believe she told me at the time I was one of her tough patients. I was,
Well, she was.
it was really a lot, you know, not being young. I think I was about 33 years old. I'm 51 now. And just not being normal. And it just really was scary, painful, and unknown of what's my next step. And I'm going to Anka like, can you help me? Because I don't know what to do at this point. Everything is happening. My body is being attacked. I think after I was diagnosed in 2005, the next year, it attacked my kidneys and I had lupus nephritis. They had to do about 6 or 7 biopsies on my kidneys, and I thought I might need a kidney transplant. I wasn't sure. Very scary, especially when you're a mom with a 5-year-old, and I had a husband at the time. You're wondering, what is my future going to look like? And I went to Anka for those answers because I did not know.
So it's been a privilege working with Yvonne, and it's been a privilege learning about lupus.
Yes.
I feel that I still learn about lupus every day. The more I know, the more I feel like I need to know. And I think that part of that journey, my journey of better understanding lupus, featured Yvonne. Yvonne ended up having brain lupus,
Yes.
and that was very scary. She was in the hospital for a couple of months, 3 months, I think.
Actually, I'm blessed to be here because it's been 12 years since I was in NYU for 4 months after my lupus stroke. I could not talk, I could not walk, I could not eat. I talked like a 10-year-old. And I basically I remember her coming to my room every day. She knew me so well. And she would tell my mother, who didn't know what was happening, what's wrong with my daughter? And doctor said, she's gonna be all right. I know her, she's strong, she's gonna come through this. And I was totally out of it. It really almost took my life. And this is the second time I had my life almost taken. First it was the DVT, and now the stroke that actually lupus caused the attack on my brain. It was very, very scary. But I have to tell you, the clinicians, the physicians, all the nurse practitioners, the entire staff, therapists, they were phenomenal. And they're the reason why I'm standing here or sitting here, because they were phenomenal. Dr. Oscanes was great. All the team doctors that worked with me, they got me to be here today after 12 years. So I'm very blessed and thankful.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. This is so inspiring. It's a message of hope that we have learned about lupus, and we can get people like you back into life, back into enjoying their families, and back into being here with us to tell us their stories.
I think the most important thing, though, you can't take life for granted, and I don't. So I became a peer mentor in 2006 with the Christopher Reeve Foundation, and I talked to people over the country to help them get through life like it is now, because sometimes you have to mourn who you were in order to move forward. And so I am a vessel of hope, and I wear hope on my sleeve all the time when I have these events to show you that you can have a life after lupus.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne, for this inspiring and extraordinary testimony of your life with lupus and beyond. Now, this is a lovely photograph of Yvonne and me taken 2020 when we were doing a little segment about lupus awareness. It was the week before New York City closed, right before the pandemic. So we've all gotten younger since. So it is a great privilege to introduce Amit Saxena. Dr. Saxena is an associate professor in the Division of Rheumatology at NYU Langone Medical Center here at NYU. He is the director of lupus clinical trials and the director of the Masters in Clinical Investigations and the Clinical Design trial course. Amit, I've known Amit since he was a resident, so it feels particularly wonderful to be here on the stage and talk and think about lupus with Amit. In a way, my mentee and my friend for a long time, so grateful to be here. My task is going to be to give you a little bit of overview about lupus and about the clinical manifestations, so that for those in the audience that are not fully versed in lupus, it becomes more of a clear picture of what we're trying to achieve here. Lupus is a prototypical autoimmune disease with a wide range of manifestations and a very variable course. We've heard from Yvonne how difficult it was to have a diagnosis, how difficult it was to find the right team of doctors. So it is this heterogeneity and this variability that makes diagnosis, treatment, and evaluation of lupus a challenge. Lupus disproportionately affects African Americans and other minorities. The hallmarks of the disease are autoantibodies and immune complexes. The immune dysfunction in lupus leads to inflammation and organ damage. Active disease and treatment side effects are associated with damage and increased mortality. Now, on this side of the slide, on the left side of the slide, right as you're looking at it, I put some of the most common symptoms. Oh, oops. I totally forgot that I didn't have a mic on me, so apologies for that. So the most common symptoms of lupus, much like Yvonne told you earlier, are joint pains. The overwhelming majority of people with lupus have joint pains. Actually, over 95% of the people with lupus have joint pains. And then photosensitive rashes and fatigue. It is not just being tired, it's overwhelming fatigue that kind of reminds people with that don't have lupus of the fatigue you have when you have the bad flu. The heterogeneity of lupus is obvious in the clinical manifestations, and the outer circle there shows the fact that lupus doesn't spare any part of the body. 50% of the people with lupus have kidney disease. They can have involvement of the heart and the lungs, the skin, the brain, much like we heard from Yvonne, the hematological system, the joints. They can have fever, ulcers. So there is an enormous heterogeneity in the clinical manifestations, but there's also immunological heterogeneity. Some patients, the disease is driven by interferon, some others by the lymphocytes, others have different cytokines that drive the main manifestations, and others it's driven by the neutrophils. But at the heart of this, it is the patient heterogeneity. Lupus is more frequent, more severe, and has higher disease activity and more damage accrual in non-Caucasian populations. Hispanics, people of African American descent, and Asians are more likely to be affected by lupus and have more severe lupus. Additionally, as we've heard, lupus is also associated with diagnostic delay. When thinking about new treatments for lupus, we keep in mind the fact that targeting specific parts of the underlying mechanism of the disease, it's the best way to develop new drugs for lupus. A large portion of lupus is related to genetic predisposition. About 44% of patients recognize a high heritability. Patients and their families have other relatives that are affected by lupus. First-degree relatives of people with SLE have a much higher risk of the disease, about 6% compared to the 1 in 1,000 in the rest of the population. Most cases of lupus are a combination of genetic, epigenetic, and environmental factors. Out of the environmental factors, cigarette smoking, silica exposure, oral contraceptives, stress. And I think that Yvonne told us again and again that her life was stressful at the time of the diagnosis and at the time when lupus got worse. And now more and more we're understanding the role of microbiome. NYU has been instrumental, and Jill's program here has been instrumental in bringing attention to the role of the microbiome in both the onset and the progression of lupus. Possibly one of the most interesting findings over the past several decades is the fact that lupus does not happen overnight. Lupus in at-risk individuals in the setting of triggers, which sometimes are sunlight, some other times dietary changes, estrogens, there sets the stage for the production of autoantibodies. Autoantibodies appear, and then subsequently symptoms, isolated rashes, isolated joint pain occur. And this happens several years before patients develop the classified criteria for lupus. Eventually, tissue damage ensues. This time of autoimmunity and incomplete lupus is the time when we think there's a window of opportunity for screening and prevention. And a lot of work has been put into fully understanding how we can prevent lupus. We hope that next year we can come back and tell you that we have the treatment to prevent lupus. So a lot of work has been put into making treatments for lupus a little more organized so that rheumatologists at NYU, rheumatologists at Columbia, and rheumatologists across the country and the world treat lupus in a similar way. These are the European Association guidelines for the treatment of non-renal lupus. And it is the first time when targets like remission are being discussed about. So we now have enough medications that we can consider remission as a possible outcome for lupus. In addition, we also know that being healthy overall is important for lupus, and these guidelines highlight the importance of sun protection, of healthy exercise, of not smoking, of a balanced diet, of vaccinations, of maintaining normal weight and blood pressure as part of what we need to do and what we need to counsel lupus patients so that they can maintain themselves in the best possible health. You will note that these guidelines look at the quality of the evidence, and the best quality of evidence in terms of how to treat lupus comes from randomized controlled trials. There's still a lot of yellow and orange on the slide, which means some of the treatments that we use daily in the treatment of lupus do not have the highest grade of recommendation. Now, hydroxychloroquine is the backbone of all lupus treatments. And I think that there aren't high enough words to praise hydroxychloroquine. Now, absolutely. So unfortunately, steroids are still a big part of what we use to treat lupus. And we've learned they're damaging, and we've learned that we need to minimize their use, but we still use a lot of steroids. We're hoping that as we have better targeted therapies for lupus, we're going to rely less and less on using steroids. Nonetheless, the current guidelines still put sort of on the second line steroids for the treatment of lupus. Because lupus nephritis is part of lupus, but it's a little different. Our European colleagues proposed guidelines for the treatment of lupus nephritis as a separate exercise. Now you'll see here, there's a lot more quality data to substantiate the way we treat people with lupus. But again, we are now able to target somewhere around a year or two disease remission. Now, the part where these guidelines are falling short is that they're not really giving us a hierarchy of, how to do things once we diagnose lupus nephritis. They're putting kind of on the same level mycophenolate mofetil, cyclophosphamide, the combination which we now call triple therapy of belimumab with MMF, or belimumab with cyclophosphamide, or belimumab with the calcineurin inhibitors, out of which voclosporin is the most recently approved treatment for lupus nephritis.
Some people, hello. Some of these medicines work for some people and some of the medicines don't. And that's another part of the research we're all trying to do, is to figure out what medicines will work for the right person and really get that personalized care that we're hoping we can get to at some point.
A lot of work needs to be done to fully be able to match the right treatment to the right person, be that based on the genetics, be that based on the way their disease is involving the tissues, or be it simply how it looks on the outside. The other pieces that are also very clear is that while there are immunologic treatments, and the middle part of this slide is about the immunologic treatments, we need to pay attention to the non-immunological treatments. Much like for non-kidney lupus, we think about, keeping the body healthy. Here we need to think about keeping the kidneys healthy by using blood pressure control, and decreasing the blood flow in the kidneys with blood pressure medications. For people that have some blood clotting associated, we use anticoagulants. So, throughout this exercise, we now have a much more organized way of thinking about how to treat lupus nephritis. We're also involved in providing some guidance from the American College of Rheumatology, and hopefully those guidelines are going to be available by the end of the year. And we're hoping that we'll be able to provide a little more clear understanding as to what the first treatment should be. Now, on a personal level, I advocate that you need to go, you need to go high in the beginning and then withdraw treatments. And I think that a lot of the lupus physicians feel the same. Now it's our turn to actually put this into action. This slide is busy, but all I'm trying to say here is that it takes a village to take care of people with lupus. And this is a list, by no means exhaustive, of all the possible specialists that lupus patients might see, either for lupus manifestations, for their comorbidities, or for the complications of their therapies. Cardiologist, dermatologist, endocrinologist, and please don't be upset, this is in alphabetical order. So pretty much all specialists are involved in the care of people with lupus. But the orchestrator is the rheumatologist or the lupus specialist. The consequence of disease activity and inflammation is organ damage. And for lupus nephritis, that organ damage is end-stage kidney disease. About 10 to 30% of lupus patients still develop kidney failure. We cannot afford to maintain the status quo. We need to do better. In terms of cardiovascular and cerebrovascular disease, there's a high risk of death due to cardiovascular disease. There's a high risk of stroke. Ergo, more needs to be done. Also, work loss is a common consequence of lupus. About only 46% of people living with lupus report being employed. Not enough. It is such a huge loss. Additionally, over time, for patients that are employed, about 33% of them stop working at the end of 4 years. What a terrible loss. And then, despite improvements in diagnosis and treatment, lupus patients remained at higher than expected mortality risk. And the slides goes into a lot of detail about how survival is significantly worse than in the general population in people with lupus. And on average, people with lupus lose 15 years of life expectancy. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Saxena to walk us through some of the health disparities in lupus.
So Thanks, Dr. Arsenaze. I do want to just take a second to reiterate what you were talking about how really grateful I am to be here and be here with you. I do think that lupus, maybe amongst all the diseases, the world of lupus is really like a family, right? You think about the patients that we have for their entire lives. We are together every 3 months forever. The doctors who are interested in specialists in this really care about this in a way that we learn from each other. And I think about all the times I spent with Dr. Askanase, Dr. Bayan, all of the other great specialists here, and we learn from each other, we learn from the patients, and we're all just trying to get to that glorious endpoint of really treating people the way they're supposed to be treated and having them feel well. And so when we talk about that, we have to talk about the fact that we've gotten so far in terms of what we've learned. All of this stuff that Dr. Askanase just talked about was years and years of research and clinical trials that have gotten to us to a point where there are now medicines that we really do feel are useful and that we can really put people into remission. And there's some new stuff that's even more exciting. But that doesn't stop the fact that the reality of how we take care of our patients is extremely complicated. And it is harder, actually, sometimes the more that people learn about the disease and learn, about how to, or that they need to access care, that care is not always there for them. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about, the reality of healthcare and lupus and be a little bit empathetic to both the patients and the doctors here because it's complicated. Obviously, there's not a ton of rheumatologists just in general. I think in New York City, there's probably a higher concentration than most places. But of course, you get out of the city and out of the state, there's going to be just a couple of rheumatologists for all the patients that are there. And so there's huge workforce shortages, and that's going to limit our ability to see patients. And even when we do have patients, doctors, everybody is booked up. People just get appointments. They call into the office. They say, "Oh, I have lupus." Okay, you get put in the back of the line. 6 months to the next appointment. And how do you prioritize the patients who are really having some of those dangerous, really intense symptoms and not make them wait 6 months while you might be seeing some lesser sick patients later? And so these are, again, some of the burdens that we're thinking about. Dr. Askanase, myself, Dr. Bayan, there's many of us that actually focus on lupus, not just rheumatologists. And we like to think that we are well suited to take care of those patients. But again, how do you access those specialists? How do you know that they exist? How do you get an appointment with them? How do you get an appointment with them not in a year? And these are things that, from us, we want to see those patients. We want to be there and really address these kinds of needs. But it's hard because, we have no access to those people when they're calling into the office and just getting put at the end of the line. And, Dr. Askanase talked about, all of the different specialists, right, that you have to see. And a lot of times trying to organize that falls on the rheumatologists. Like we're the ones trying to get you in to see a cardiologist in a day or a dermatologist in a day. And so these are some of the burdens that we have. But of course, the main issue is what are the burdens on the patients? And from your side, of course, long wait times. How can somebody tell you, your primary care doctor tell you, "Oh, you have lupus, you look it up, you see all these things, oh, but you can wait 6 months until you see a specialist," right? That doesn't sound right. That's not right at all. What about insurance? You have a doctor, maybe you've got a doctor that you love, and then your job changes insurance, and now all of a sudden you've got to figure out what to do. You're starting fresh all over again. That's not fair.
So our job is to figure out mechanisms to make sure that these sick patients, the people that are in immediate need to come and see the rheumatologist and the lupus specialist, find us and have access to us immediately. The faster we act, the more likely that we're going to make an impact before things are irreversible.
Exactly. And how do the patients balance all of their own responsibilities with these 10 appointments of specialists they have to see and their jobs and their families? And then when we all get down to it, of course, we're trying to treat our patients and we want to make sure they're taking their medicines. But if they can't take their medicines for whatever reason, how do we address that? So these are a lot of the burdens that we have to, now that we know exists, have to address. Go ahead, we can move on to the next.
We talk a lot about adherence and there's sort of a negative aura around it. But I think there are things that both the doctors and the patients can do to get better at it. First, I think aligning priorities is very important because for me, it's important to prevent kidney disease, but maybe for the patient, it's a lot more important to be able to go to work. Ergo, we need to figure out how to make those priorities mutual priorities and how to choose the best treatments to ensure that that happens.
Yeah, that probably starts with just building trust, right? You have to trust, the patients have to trust your doctor, and then be honest about if they're not taking their medicine and why. And so
And trust doesn't happen in a day.
I'm going to buzz through the next couple of slides, but the reason, and a lot of this is stuff that we've talked about already, but the reason why it's so important to get people in is just because those early phases of lupus are really some of the most severe phases. And we know that patients can take a long time before they get access to doctors or even get diagnosed. We know about lupus nephritis as something that happens early in the disease course. So these are things that if you are waiting for, maybe you were diagnosed with just non-renal lupus of rashes and joints, but in that time you were waiting to be seen, you developed kidney disease. That is something we need to avoid, absolutely.
And I think Jill's approach of actually having patients have their own urine dipsticks to check for protein in the urine at home is going to be critical in making big advancements.
That delay in symptom onset, that's really frustrating for patients, right? They've been going to doctor saying, I've had these symptoms that maybe weren't put together. Yvonne, your primary care doctor was fantastic, but not everybody can see the forest from the trees at times. It's not their fault. They're all very busy. But sometimes it can take a long time, and we've got to address that.
And sometimes it's the nature of the beast, right? Because lupus symptoms come and go. So by the time you see the rheumatologist, maybe there's nothing left. And the first response is going to be, you're fine, right?
But you're not fine, obviously.
Absolutely.
And we know that this disease really affects how people live their lives and their quality of life. And again, early in the course of the disease, that's where we see some of the highest rates of mortality. And in the end, a lot of these slides kind of lead to the final point of this is very serious, and what font can we put this in to say that this is very serious and we have to do this very quickly. And again, trying to get equity to that care, of course, that's the thing, right? So certain people may have better access to these to doctors and treatments than other people, and we really need to even that out. And we know that these social determinants of health are really big issues for patients with lupus. And some of this data here, you don't have to pay too much attention to, but this list on this graph here is just different types of social determinants of health that have been shown to be issues in patients with lupus, and that when are addressed, come out. The people discuss them more. They're not really things that we talk about in a normal setting of doctor's appointments, but if we actually think about them, we'll find out that patients are dealing with some of these issues with access, whether it's to care or food or other things that are super important. And in general, these changes in social determinants of health are related to higher rates of just the disease itself, disease progression, and again, coming back to that final hardest endpoint, death, mortality, the thing we really need to make sure we don't.
These health disparities are real and are part of everyday life for a lot of people struggling with lupus. And I think we also need to acknowledge the role of racism in these inequities. And I think that we can talk a lot more about that, and we'd like to, but we have a couple of more points to make.
Yeah, go ahead. So when we talk about these disparities, and there's been a lot of research in this, again, we know a lot about this now. Of course, the question is, what do we do from here? But you can tell by looking at differences in patients on different types of insurances. For example, Medicaid patients travel further distances to see their rheumatologists. A lot of those patients will use the emergency room instead of having a rheumatologist for when they have severe disease, such as kidney disease. And those doctors are not trained to treat lupus kidney disease, so they're not going to prescribe the right medications, the immunosuppressants that are needed to keep those kidneys in check. And a lot of these patients, again, racial, ethnic diversity patients who are Black and Hispanic, less likely to receive kidney disease care. higher odds of persistently high-dose steroid use. And again, Dr. Askanase mentioned that our ultimate goal with treating this disease is to do it without steroids because of all of those bad side effects that happen afterwards. And again, coming down to that final point, mortality, all of it shows these are hard evidence of what happens with lack of equity. And I'm not going to do too much on this slide. I'll just point to a couple of things. Really seminal work here done by Peter Ismerly, looking at just the various levels of lupus within Manhattan. And the second point, again, just kind of goes to reiterate the higher rates of Hispanic, Black, Hispanic, and non-Hispanic Asian women having lupus compared to non-Hispanic white women. And that top right, I think, is just very interesting. You know, the overall disease of lupus in terms of numbers of patients is not necessarily huge, maybe around 200,000 people in the US. But it's still ranked among the top 20 leading causes of death in women of all reasons. That just tells you how significant this disease still can be.
Now, we have underestimated our ability to talk about lupus, so please pardon us. We're taking another 2 of your minutes.
I'm just going to finish up by bringing it back, you know, to that first point that I made about those barriers to care. And how, starting the discussion, we're going to further the discussion next, but we're going to start the discussion about recognizing some of those important symptoms that the non-rheumatologist needs to think about, or should think about, in terms of trying to really get their patients the right access and timely treatment. So, you know, think about those initial evaluations when you're first seen. Really, you want to focus on those severe disease manifestations. Things like really bad swollen joints. Like when you have the types of pain, the joint pains that you are not able to function, that patient should be prioritized. When you have a rash that's spreading, you know, and we know that rashes scar quickly, and if you don't treat them quickly, they will be permanent. And so we want to prioritize those patients. Obviously, anything to do with chest pains, shortness of breath, you know, really severe organ manifestations, and of course, leading to that kidney disease. You know, swollen legs, bubbles in the urine. If a doctor hears those symptoms, that all sorts of alarm bells should start going off. You know, I think a lot of doctors rely on lab tests. We do it too, but that's not the end all be all. I think we need to really think more about just the labs and think more about what the patient is actually feeling. And anybody who's suspected to have, you know, lupus should have at least urine studies to check again. We're talking, going back to Dr. Bayan's plan, just looking at the urine, check that urine, because people can feel fine with lupus nephritis and still have really bad disease. And so that's really important. If you think lupus, you should be checking for the urine.
And a word of wisdom for people with lupus: don't give up. Just knock on that door again. Just be the squeaky wheel. Eventually, you'll get to the right doctor and you'll get the right treatment. Yeah. Thank you, Amit.
Thanks.
Truly appreciate it. My heart is beaming with pride right now that I'm introducing Leila Khalili, a nurse practitioner that has taken the world of lupus by storm. She had walked into my office 5 years ago and has made such a big transformation in the lupus program at Columbia. She's one of the pillars of our program. She is the director of research operations, and she has been an absolute wonderful asset to the program and to me personally. So take it home, Leila.
I'm Leila Khalili. I'm an NP and the Director of Research Operations at the Columbia Lupus Center. So we just heard from Dr. Askanase, Dr. Bayan, Dr. Saxena, and Yvonne about how complicated lupus is and how important early treatment is in preventing damage from lupus. And we also heard about how important care coordination and multidisciplinary teams are in optimizing lupus treatment. And advanced practice providers like NPs and PAs play a big role in making sure people living with lupus get the care that they need. So today, the team here hopes to encourage some actions that can be taken to improve rheumatology and lupus care. Timely access to care is critical, and it's particularly important to screen people with lupus for renal involvement, as we've heard multiple times today. Access to care can be improved by prioritizing sick patients for referrals, leveraging telemedicine to get patients in earlier, and encouraging early diagnostic workups by primary care providers and specialists. Like we've heard again multiple times today, and Yvonne's story was particularly powerful, are important actions. It's also vital that primary care providers and ER providers, who are oftentimes the first line of providers who see lupus patients, refer them for appointments with appropriate lupus specialists quickly. Having protocols in place for rheumatology follow-ups for patients who have recently been to the ER or admitted for a lupus-related problem, as well as other specialties that lupus patients may need. Dr. Askanase talked a little bit about that, such as dermatology, nephrology, cardiology, et cetera, can be helpful in improving access to care and timely treatment, and therefore reducing damage for patients living with lupus in the long run. And the third action I'll talk about includes providing people living with lupus with education on advanced and complex therapies and clinical trial opportunities. This is important in the shared decision-making process between patients and providers. Some steps that can be taken to support this goal include assessing social determinants of health to address barriers that may prevent patient visits and medication adherence, providing appropriate and culturally relevant resources to patients, and learning about clinical trial opportunities within your center and geographic area, so that everyone is aware, and when the time is right, patients and providers can make that decision about participating in a clinical trial together. Thanks so much.
I'm going to move back to the mic. Thank you, Layla. Thank you so much, Layla. That was amazing. As we said, the best practices, that's what it's all about, making sure that we have that call to action and learn from these experts. So with that being said, I am really happy right now to call up our panel. So we have Dr. Karen Costley, Seth Ginsberg, and from the Lupus Research Alliance, Stacy Bell. And as they're coming up, I'll mention, so Dr. Askanase could not have spoken higher about Layla, her nurse practitioner. We do want to mention that we've heard several times it takes a village. Thank you to all of the rheumatology nurses, the rheumatology nurse practitioners, the nurses, the RNS is here in the room, the Rheumatology Nurses Society, for all the different social workers, behavioral health specialists, all of those that make up the community that helps these patients. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel. So thank you for being here. We are excited to speak to you, each and every one of you, and the organizations you represent has been crucial in making this day happen. We're going to speak to them about their themselves, their organizations, the challenges that people living with lupus face, and a little bit about what's exciting. So why don't we start by, we'll do ladies first on the end, and start by introducing Dr. Karen Costley.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. My name's Dr. Karen Costley. I'm an AVP Medical Director at Health First. Health First is one of the largest nonprofit insurers here in New York, very hyper-local. We have about 1.9 million members, and we're growing. Most of those members are Medicaid, so we are very familiar with some of the challenges that were discussed earlier in accessing care, accessing quality care, accessing culturally sensitive care, and the challenges that our primary care providers face in sometimes trying to get patients to care quickly. We are very much prioritizing health equity. We want all of our members to get the high quality care. We want our members in the South Bronx to be getting the same kind of care that somebody on the Upper East Side is getting for lupus and for all diseases. But we know that it's a challenge, and we know that sometimes just having Medicaid alone creates a challenge for providers because they already believe that these patients are problematic. They might not keep their appointments. They're not going to be compliant without taking into consideration all of the challenges regarding their social issues. You know, if you can't put food on the table, or if you can't pay your rent, or if you don't have housing, sometimes taking care of your lupus or other medical problems is not going to be your priority, right? So our goal is to help members where they live, meet them where they live, identify the issues that they're facing challenges with, getting access to care, having providers being able to prioritize appointments for patients that need it. Because we also have heard from providers, if my patient can't get in for 6 to 8 months, I'm sending them to the ER because I don't know how to manage this. So our goal is to work with our sponsor hospitals. I don't know if I mentioned that we are owned by most of the major hospital systems here in New York, including NYU, Columbia, Montefiore, Northwell, and many others. So our goal is to work with the sponsor hospitals to help identify processes that will make it easier for our patients to access high quality care.
Thank you, Dr. Costley. So, Stacy, it is a pleasure to have you here today. Maybe we can have you just share a little bit about yourself and the Lupus Research Alliance and your mission.
I would be happy to. Thank you, Donna. And I just cannot express how excited I am to be here today, interacting with all of you, and how fortunate I feel to be able to serve in the role that I do. And finally, I'd also like to thank everyone that partnered with us to make this event happen. I know that it took on a life of its own, and because of it, there were so many new dimensions that were brought to this event today, so a big thank you there. So as Donna said, I'm Stacy Bell. I'm fortunate to serve as the Executive Vice President of Lupus Therapeutics. Lupus Therapeutics is the clinical affiliate of the Lupus Research Alliance. The Lupus Research Alliance is headquartered here in New York, right down on Madison Avenue. But really we have a national reach, and many of the programs that we have ongoing not only focus on things that are happening within the New York City area, but much more broadly than that. At the Lupus Research Alliance, our focus is to put those that are living with lupus at the center in all that we do. We strive and focus on bringing new diagnostics and new treatments forward to the community while keeping everyone's voices at the center and having outreach and developing those new therapies and those new diagnostics. In addition to that, we really focus on bringing forward programs that are going to meet people where they are, as Dr. Costley mentioned. So we have a variety of programs within the LRA as a whole to support our research activities, and then within Lupus Therapeutics on the clinical research front, also overseeing our health equity and our patient engagement efforts. So within Lupus Therapeutics, we are fortunate to have a clinical trial network across North America. We have over 50 academically based centers primarily, and within the context of those centers, we have over 200 specialists that really focus on lupus and focus on care in that regard. Those centers also have an outreach of over 25,000 individuals living with lupus. And because of the diverse location of those centers, we're able to reach a variety of patients and again, meet them where they are. I grew up in rural North Dakota. So Donna was focusing or commenting earlier on access to care, and I am the poster child for what it looks like to struggle with rural health and rural medicine. And so it's an area that I'm very, very focused on and passionate about. As I look around the room and I look at those individuals, each of us have our own story that we bring to this journey. I have battled autoimmune disease elements the majority of my life, but I've been very fortunate. I've been able to have children. I've been able to have my career. I've been able to pursue a lot of the athletic endeavors that I enjoy. And the reason that I'm in this role is to help others be able to do that. I'm also very fortunate as I look in this room to partner with providers like Layla, like Dr. Askanase, like Dr. Saxena, who really are dedicated and passionate about not only caring for individuals, but working through organizations like the LRA to ensure that our mission is met and that we help individuals living with lupus.
So, Seth. So Seth Ginsburg from the Global Healthy Living Foundation, and also known as Creaky Joints or Division, but a friend, colleague. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself and your organization with our audience today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Donna. Let me just begin by thanking you, UCB, and Biogen, as well as Aurinia and our wonderful host here, NYU Langone Hospital, as well as so many just unbelievable just leaders and incredible folks in the lupus community. It's inspiring to be in great company. I joke if there were a Mount Rushmore of lupus, a lot of the faces in this room would be on it. Not mine per se, but I'd be leading the tour around it, talking about the great work. And as such, again, I'm Seth Ginsburg. I'm a co-founder of the Global Healthy Living Foundation, which began 25 years ago this October as an online patient community called Creaky Joints for people with rheumatic disease. So over the years, we've had the opportunity living online to talk with many people living with lupus. Tens of thousands of patients and their families find their way to our community, our social networks, and our organization to lean into learning more, to sharing strength and support with one another. And I'm really proud that GHLF and Creaky Joints have been a catalyst for so many literal countless interactions, millions of interactions over all these years. And if there are a few takeaways that I could glean from this and really want to drive home, and I think the purpose for me being here today is, first of all, to serve as a champion and to be a voice to allow for those conversations to continue in the right direction toward a hopeful future. We heard about the advances in therapeutics. We heard about these gaps in care and the equity that must be addressed. And GHLF is a staunch supporter of those issues, and we put those front and center. We do them with our partners, we do them with our sponsors, and we do them with the public because we need everybody to have an understanding of the seriousness of this disease, the incredible equity gaps that exist with respect to diagnosis and then treatment and managing and just life with this disease. And while I am from the country of New York, as I like to say, I do want to just speak to, for a moment, the worldwide issue that is lupus. And we have a nice, tight macrocosm here of that community in New York, but in every direction from here, near and far, there are people living with and struggling with and being challenged with lupus. And we are New Yorkers, which means we set the example and we set the precedent as leaders. And I'm very proud to be from New York, but also very proud to have representation here from the New York City Council, who I know we'll hear from very shortly, and her journey since the age of 17 living with lupus, and now as somebody in City Hall, the largest city in America, to champion the voice and the experience and the needs of lupus patients. But then to your everyday average Jane or John who goes online tonight at the very end of their rope in search of something to keep them moving, something to keep them going, and something to help them tomorrow morning when they wake up. And so it's all of our jobs to make sure we're on the other side of that person's search on Google or TikTok or anything in between nowadays that affords that person the chance at scale to do a little bit better. So it's really a privilege to be here, and I'm really excited for this dialogue and so happy that we could be a part of this important Lupus Day of Action.
Thank you, Seth. So, Karen, Dr. Costley, I cannot thank you enough for being here. Health First in general. I will tell you, it is not common that we partner with our payers in my world. So we just can't say how grateful we are to have you here. Not only to have you here, but the transparency that Health First has had as we looked at your population of people living with lupus that are under the Health First umbrella. And you've shared so much with us. I think it was Dr. Saxena that mentioned that when you have lupus, you see your doctor every 3 months. That's not always the case. Dr. Costley was kind enough to share with us, as they look at the thousands upon thousands of just here in New York City people living with lupus, that many of them may not have seen a specialist in years.
Right.
And maybe you could share with us a little, some of the things that Health First is doing to overcome that challenge of accessing care to specialists.
Sure. So one of the things that we have as an insurer is access to data. It's claims data, so it's not comprehensive by any means, but it can give us some information about who patients are seeing, where they're seeing them, what medications they're taking, and how often they're seeing them. We have about 7,000 lupus patients or members who have had lupus listed on a claim that was submitted to Health First. Of those, within the last 2 years, about 50% of them have seen a PCP, and even about 28% of those have seen a rheumatologist. And those that did see a rheumatologist saw a rheumatologist about twice a year. What we're interested in understanding is what's happening to the rest of the patients with lupus. Why are they not accessing care? What are the challenges they are facing? And we're working with our hospital sponsors to understand how to improve their experience. So I think Dr. Saxena mentioned that sometimes they have to see multiple specialists, right? Infectious disease, cardiology, rheumatology. For somebody who's working a 9 to 5 dependent on an income, it might not be easy to schedule 3 different days of appointments. Maybe we can work with our hospital sponsors to coordinate those appointments so that they can all happen in one day. We can also try to, I just lost my train of thought, sorry. Oh, for the providers that are the PCPs, and Yvonne, your story is so inspirational, and it's heartening to hear that you have a PCP that you trusted, because I believe that having a primary care provider who you trust and who you can discuss challenges with is so important. And your PCP recognized that what you had might need, more of an evaluation. We are working with our community physicians and our hospital sponsors to allow them to have things like e-consults, where they might be able to just speak to a rheumatologist and say, this is my patient, this is what's happening, can you give me some advice? Instead of waiting 6 to 8 months for an appointment. We are looking at the hospital specialty appointments to see if we can have slots that are designated for ER follow-ups for the patients that are identified as needing them. And if they're not urgent, can we have it sooner than however the length of time is? I heard from one provider, a neurologist, that their next appointment is a year from now. Patients just aren't going to deal with that. And as providers, it's frustrating also, right? We as physicians want our patients evaluated much sooner. So those are just some of the things we're doing, working with our hospital sponsors, trying to, continue open communication about how to best serve a population that can be challenging, but that absolutely needs the care.
Thank you, Dr. Costley. So, Stacy, I'd love for you to maybe share with us. We mentioned that this is the first day of Lupus Awareness Month. The lupus community is doing so many exciting and creative things this month. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about anything you want to brag on happening this month, either in New York or beyond.
Of course. So I'll comment a bit on Lupus Awareness Month, but just kind of overall discussing some of the elements that the Lupus Research Alliance does. So in addition to funding, supporting, encouraging innovative research, the one thing that I'm so proud of, our organization, and frankly, the lupus community as a whole, all of our organizations, is the focus on collaboration. And really, without collaboration, we can't succeed with all the things that we'd like to do. So some elements of collaboration within the LRA, but really extending beyond that, really focuses on some of the elements I mentioned as part of Lupus Therapeutics, in our health equity efforts. We have a groundbreaking effort right now that's been initiated called Project Change, going out into communities, working directly with them. These efforts are being spearheaded by Claire Finney, who heads up our health equity group and really has helped a lot prepare the event today too, so big kudos to her. But within that context, going out into specific communities and finding where we can reach individuals in that case. Perhaps it's at a community center, perhaps it's at a faith-based center, whatever we can do in looking at the communities within that. We've formed lupus research collaboratives within those communities to really evaluate that. Now, not only working with providers and the institutions, but again, all the other leaders in that area. I think one of the other things is our patient engagement programs. Our patient advocates for lupus studies is really a phenomenal program where we have patients serve as peer education mentors, having early education for trials, serving as a trial buddy to help them through the process. We have a number of patient advisory boards to help developers, patient education programs and patient experience programs so they can go out to payers or they can go to companies or institutions and really talk about their lived experience like Yvonne did today. Really sharing what that journey means so that people can really understand and do a much better job, helping with them. I think going beyond that, very recently, the Lupus Research Alliance has formed a public-private partnership with the Food and Drug Administration called the Lupus ABC, or the Lupus Accelerating Breakthroughs Consortium. This is just an innovative, groundbreaking, first of its kind opportunity for all stakeholders to come together. So whether that's other lupus organizations, those living with lupus, we have a research arm of that effort. And we also have the Lupus Voices Council, where those individuals living with lupus have a seat at the table to talk to our regulators, to talk to our drug developers. Carla Menendez is leading that effort. She's here today. If you haven't had the opportunity, I would encourage you to meet with her. In addition to that, I think all of us working together, there's so many synergies within our organization. You'll hear from Joy Bowie later. She's talking about the Lupus Foundation of America. I think that all of us joining forces, bringing our strengths, will really help us succeed for those living with lupus. The other thing that I'd mentioned, we've talked a lot today about being able to have individuals access care. So it's also, if you look at the recent research, it was published, I believe, at ACR last year, talking about the interaction between providers and those living with lupus. So what we all can do as organizations to make that more comfortable, to make that more fluid. So we have launched the first of its kind healthcare provider directory within lupus. I would encourage you to go to the Lupus Therapeutics website. We have over 300 providers already included in that. It's not only rheumatologists, but it's all of our care partners, so that really can foster that collaborative care. And then for Lupus Awareness Month, yay, everybody wear your purple, have your butterflies, but importantly, be engaged in your community. There are a social media toolkit that the LRA has put out, but again, all of the organizations have ways, events, activities where you can be involved. We have a walk at MetLife Stadium this coming Saturday. I would encourage you to go out and take part there, support our community in any way that you can.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Seth. So again, thank you for being here. Global Healthy Living Foundation has helped my company, many pharmaceutical companies, many patients, many providers, especially when it comes to making sure that we all have a voice, that we have a voice with our policymakers, with our healthcare managed care companies. There's so much you do to make sure that you support the patient communities, and thank you for that. What I was wondering is there anything that you have going on in the communities that you'd like to share or a little brag about in ways of how you can ensure that we reach the people that are sometimes harder to reach?
Definitely. And so for the next hour and a half, I'd like to no. but
or 2 minutes.
Yes, exactly. No, and let me just say, GHLF has a foundational resource called Patient Spot, and patientspot.org is a tool that we built with the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute 10 years ago, and it's a platform that lets people. It's an app as well as a website for folks to easily plug into their condition and allow for them to get personal information and share data back with their doctor, with researchers, with their family. And so Patient Spot is a resource that sets a level playing field for patients so that when they deal with their or work with their doctors, they can do it in a productive way. There are 50 state network opportunities for people to participate in advocacy in every state of this capital of this country and their capital, where so much of the healthcare decisions are made. And then there are, of course, lots of social media channels that you don't have to go far to knock your head into, because there's a conversation happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with people and their families around these topics exactly. I know that what I'm saying is what's coming between us and, I believe, Tony Braxton. So I'm going to cut my comments very short and turn it back to you, Donna.
Thank you. And thank all of you for all that you do to help the lupus community. So I am excited to introduce one of our partners, Arenia Pharmaceuticals. UCB and Biogen engaged in this project almost 4 years ago. And in the last 6-7 months, Arenia came to us and asked how they would be involved. And we mentioned, we really need a large voice. How can we get somebody that's influential? And they brought to us, without further ado, Tony Braxton. So Bianca.
Waiting to go live.
Hi everyone, I'm Bianca Boucher, and I'm the Executive Director of Marketing at Arenia Pharmaceuticals. I am so excited to be here with you today to celebrate this Lupus Call to Action Day. I am honored to be joined by 7-time Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, actress, entrepreneur, and producer, Tony Braxton, who is here to share her personal journey living with lupus as part of her partnership with Arenia and the Get Uncomfortable campaign. Today we'll discuss the importance of completing routine testing and going to the doctor to look for kidney involvement and to get ahead of leukemia. And Tony, I love that we both wore our purple today for Lupus Awareness Month. But before we delve into your personal journey with lupus, I know you've had a lot of exciting things going on for you, which is one of the reasons we're here in Los Angeles. I think there's a Las Vegas residency happening. So tell us a little bit about that.
Super excited. I love performing and to have an opportunity to just do it over again as myself and 7 entertainment and doing something called Love and Laughter, which we all could use a lot of love and laughter in our lives. And this is a wonderful combination, and I'm just excited to be at work again. So it's great to be here too with you today. So thank you for having me.
And speaking about love and laughter and all the success and smiles, I think probably for people looking in who don't truly understand your journey, they may not realize through all your success, all the challenges you had to overcome. Maybe take us back to when you first realized something was wrong, when you first suspected something.
Yeah, it's probably, gosh, how long have I had lupus? Maybe 15 years now. Going on 15 years, and it took a long time to diagnose. But 15 years ago was when I was diagnosed. Before that, there were issues, there were problems with my body, things I figured it out, didn't know what was going on. Went to various doctors, they didn't know. So having someone tell me, okay, you have lupus, helped me a lot, just knowing what the illness was, but the hardships and how my body felt going through it, trying to diagnose what was going on. I think it was quite challenging.
How long did it take you to get a diagnosis?
Honestly, it probably took close to 10 years. It took a long time.
What was happening at that time?
In that time, just different things in my body. I remember feeling chronic fatigue at first, and I just thought, my mom was perhaps working, like super busy, so kind of just dismissed it. But then there were other things, challenges in my blood work, little things, just little tests that were a little abnormal, but no one knew what it was.
And how was it being a performer during that time, also kind of going through this mystery of what you didn't know what it was?
That was the thing, being a performer made it difficult. I knew something was not quite right, but I promise I just thought, oh, it's performing. I'm doing too much. Maybe I need to lighten my load. But there were things that I would notice that my peers were able to do that I couldn't. Becoming a little more difficult.
And then who ended up making the diagnosis? Like, how did you get to, after all those years of going back to the doctor, how did you get to the point where they said you had lupus? What was that like?
I remember feeling relieved when I was finally diagnosed with but I remember not knowing a lot about it. It wasn't a lot online. Getting online was even difficult back then, but it wasn't a lot of resources at the time. I would have my doctors try to educate me and team me up with people who try to tell me, but as I often tell people, no two cases are the same. So I would tell them my symptoms, but sometimes they were like similar to their symptoms, but not quite the same. So there was nothing really to compare it to in my particular case. But I remember feeling relieved, finding, okay, this is what I have. But I remember the difficulties trying to figure out what was wrong with me. It was a bit of an enigma. I'm like, Andrea, what's wrong with me? What's going on? And the depression, I was feeling a little sadness in my body, just wondering, trying to figure out what was going on with me.
And then when you got that diagnosis, did you tell anybody?
When I first received the diagnosis, I didn't tell anyone at first. I kind of lived with it silently, just absorbing it, wondering how do I deal with it. But then I told my professional people I was working with, and I was told, don't tell anyone.
So they want you to keep it a
hide
secret.
Don't tell anyone you have lupus. You'll never work again. It's a stigma that goes with that, and people don't know a lot about it. And it had, I guess, I don't know what face it had at that time, but it did not make me happy to work.
And what was it like being on the road and performing and then maybe not feeling well? Did you feel like you were always pretending?
I was always pretending that I felt great because it has no face, it has no look to it. And everyone would ask, Tony, how are you feeling today? Oh, I'm feeling great, but inside, not so great.
And then you mentioned, before you were diagnosed, you had gotten pregnant and had a child. Did you know something was wrong then? Did that trigger something going on?
When I first got pregnant, I realized there was something wrong, but I thought it was because I was a new mom. Everyone just dismissed everything because, oh, she looks great. There's nothing wrong with her. She's not limping. She's not this. She's not ill in her body. We can't see it. So they just kept dismissing it or thinking it was that, or thinking it was something else. But by the time I got to my second pregnancy, and I went to work right away, and I was performing on stage in New York doing Beauty and the Beast, doing a Broadway show, and I fainted on stage. But I was very fortunate that it happened on the side of the stage in between the acting. And immediately they had to go straight to the emergency room. And that's when they said, something's going on with her. So test results were starting to lean towards having lupus. But lupus to me is like an eclipse. Everything has to line up to get that true diagnosis. And that's what I think doctors at that time were a bit puzzled with that.
And then when did you realize that lupus may be impacting your kidneys?
Lupus started impacting my kidneys. Just at first, Tony, you have lupus. But recently, the last couple of years, it started impacting my kidneys. I would have higher protein levels in my urine, and a little bit of, I would say, blood in my urine, little things like that. And the doctors were checking, like, this is happening continuously now. At first, it was one-off, so I like to say. But now they go, okay, we're having some issues with your kidneys, so we have to monitor you very closely. Every 3 months, let's monitor her.
And what kind of tests are you doing? Urine tests, blood work?
I do those awkward tests that we love. Not my favorite, but we love them because they work. Urine tests are very important. And getting poked with the needle, the blood test is very, very important, those two tests. They're series, but those are the most important, I find.
Now, are there ever times when you feel like you don't want to pee in the cup or get your blood work done or going again?
Yeah, most of the time I don't feel like the tinkling in the cup. I don't feel like peeing in the cup, and I definitely don't feel like getting poked with needles, but I've learned that they're important and they can save your life. And in my case, I have paperwork to prove that it's saved my life.
What is it that truly motivates you to do when you're tired? You mentioned the fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
What motivates you to get up and go to the doctor?
What motivates me to get up and take care of myself and go to the doctors, because I know it's important. Early diagnosis can change everything. Just being monitored, the doctors watching you, seeing those levels go up or down, it's just important because, you could have kidney failure, and we don't want that. If we can prevent it, we're going to try to do our best.
And how would you describe your relationship with your doctors?
My doctors are fantastic. I had to go through a lot of, I'll say, physicians to get to the doctors that were great for me. It's personal. And my doctor, my rheumatologist, my cardiologist, my urologist, they're fantastic. And they all work together.
And has that made a big difference, having doctors that talk to one another?
It's made a huge difference. I found when you get older, a lot of people think there's only one doctor for everything. But you need to see specialists. Like a rheumatologist can really, really help you. A urologist can really help you, especially if it's something like lupus nephritis. And just having these doctors that are itemized in these particular segments of my life, what's going on in my body, helps me a lot. Because My urologist knows what's going on with my kidneys. My rheumatologist knows what's going on with my lupus, with my, ANA tests, just simple things. I mean, I could go on and on about all the blood work that was abnormal for me in my life that kind of got me to this diagnosis.
And how would you describe lupus to someone on the outside looking in?
If I had to describe lupus, I often laugh about this. It's like there are moments that you feel like you have the flu every day. Every day you feel that achy feeling in your body, and some days it's great or some days it's less. But it's flu-like symptoms initially that like, am I flaring, as I like to say? Yeah.
And what do you think have been your biggest challenges since diagnosis?
The biggest challenge for me is sometimes trying to get over the fear, because that's what can prohibit you from going to the doctors and getting yourself checked out. My lupus loves my organs, starting to love my kidneys. And for me, it makes it difficult that I keep my stress levels down. And I know with most ailments, stress is a big contributor towards it, but I find that I have to balance often.
And how would you describe a typical day living with lupus?
A typical day of living with lupus can be good days and bad days. I'm always grateful for the great days, but sometimes they're not as great. And I always try to find the silver lining. Okay, today's not a great day, but yesterday was a pretty good day, and maybe tomorrow will be even better. And so when you're in a flare, we know those days can last longer and longer, but I always try to be optimistic. And for so long, I blamed myself for having lupus. I thought it was something that I did. I wasn't taking care of my body as often as I should have. And I realized I didn't know what to do to take care of it, because I didn't know that I had lupus.
And then over the years, I know, there was a while when you were performing and you didn't know you had lupus.
Yeah.
And now, more recently, you have lupus, you probably find ways to work with it.
Yeah.
But how has it impacted your career and the choices you've made?
It's definitely impacted my career, the choices that I make. I'm very fortunate that I can still perform, but I can't perform like I used to perform. I have to take it easy. I have to pace myself. I often say that. That's very important. I would love to dance on the stage like Britney Spears, but I can't do that.
Me too.
Wouldn't we both love to do that? She's fantastic. I find that, just changing my performances, sitting behind a microphone and just singing and not putting all the stress on my body, having to dance and jump up and down and things like that anymore. But I find that I'm actually enjoying that part of my career now. Just sitting there and standing there with a microphone is the bare essence of talent. It's important.
I remember one thing you had shared with me that stuck with me is that the lupus warriors who come to your shows and how you've embraced them, what they've said to you. Tell me a little bit about that.
Now, that's the part of the performance that I love, because I talk about having lupus during my performances, and I'm always I feel so blessed about the response that I get. And I have a lot of lupus warriors and coming backstage, and I always talk to them, and they'll tell me their stories, and we exchange it, and we just kind of ignite each other and fuel each other. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this.
It's amazing.
That's amazing.
You guys are lucky to have each other.
Exactly.
I know it's a really strong community.
Exactly.
And speaking of being there for one another, how about in your circle? Who's most impactful in supporting you day to day? Who do you turn to?
Who I turn to most in my circle to help me with my illness is my family. I have that's a trough of us sisters. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Most of us are girls, and that sisterhood is so important. We motivate each other because we're all moms.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find myself just doing too much, and my sisters will say, okay, that's enough. That's enough. Just take it easy. We'll come to you. And that part's great. They're the people I can talk to, because I find a lot of times I still try to hide it. I still have this mask on that I don't want people to judge me by my ailment or my illness, or think of it as a weakness, which is really crazy to think that way, But I think a lot of women, especially moms, working girls, we want to be taken like everyone else. We don't want you to look at us and go, oh, she's sick. Don't pay her any attention. Oh, she's the sick one. We don't want to be viewed that way. We have this illness, but we're okay. We're managing it.
And it sounds like it's really important to listen to your body, especially
always listen to
women
your
who are
body.
college aged or starting new careers where lupus can
Very
start.
much so. It can start when you're young.
Yeah.
I had symptoms when I was much younger. I just didn't know what they were. And I find that just educating myself and learning about it, and it's nothing that you could have done to prevent this.
Yeah.
It's just what your body's doing. It's allergic to itself in a sense,
Yes. And is there anything you worry about looking forward to the future that you're concerned about?
Sometimes if I'm going to be candid, I'm going to be completely honest, sometimes I get scared. I'm not going to lie. When I'm alone, I get scared, and I think, suppose I can't work. Suppose I have a bad moment. I can't get out the bed today. And what am I going to do? So what I've learned is I call my doctors. I talk to them. He's like, you're not feeling too great today? Let's just do some standard blood work. Let's just pee in a cup. Let's just do something just to make sure you're okay. And I find that helps a lot for me. It just gives me that comfort, like, okay, I'm just having a bad day, but I'm okay.
And you're controlling what you can control.
You can control what
Yeah.
you can control.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. And then for someone who's newly diagnosed with lupus or lupus nephritis, what advice would you give them?
Someone who's newly diagnosed with lupus or lupus nephritis, I would tell them that you're going to be okay. Find a fantastic doctor. Sometimes you got to go to 2 and 3 doctors. Sometimes you're uncomfortable going through doctors. Sometimes you can't find the right doctor. Sometimes you can't afford the doctors. How about that part?
Yeah.
But there's so many resources online. I love you, Renee. You can go there, find so many great doctors, so many great resources. And they didn't have that when I was first diagnosed. I mean, it wasn't as readily available to find out and educate yourself.
Yeah.
Read up on it. Find out everything you can. But you have to be careful even when you read up on it, because you go, are you tired? Yes, I'm tired. Did you have this? You say, oh, I have all these symptoms. Because you start feeling, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have lupus. Not that you just have lupus. I'm not dismissing it. You have lupus, but everyone's symptom is not your symptom. And that's sometimes what you have to make yourself not fall into that.
That's really
thinking.
important.
That's really important.
And I know we're talking a lot about the importance of going to your doctor. And
so important.
Talking about your symptoms.
Yes.
I mean, what would you tell someone to tell your doctor? Like, what advice would you give them that way?
The advice I would give someone when they're talking to their physician is to tell them everything. I would do that. I would say, well, that's not really related to this. I don't have to tell my doctors that. That's not lupus. And I found there were some things that I was neglecting telling my doctors, and they would say, oh, you're having that? Oh, you didn't tell us that before. Like, oh. And it would help them diagnose me better because they have all the information.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I do think we actually have a question from the audience today. One of our partners from the Lupus Research Alliance, Penny,
Hey, Penny.
has
Oh, I would love that. I love
coming
that
in.
part.
So,
Okay.
Penny, we're ready for you.
Hi, Penny. Wonderful question. Yes, I think, sorry. For me, awareness is so important. Paying it forward, helping someone else, because people helped me, having someone to turn to. My journey can help someone else. And I think for me, having lupus and having this platform, being a performer, it was very important to me to talk about it because I was ashamed. Someone made me feel ashamed. The industry made me feel ashamed. And I would never want anyone else to have that feeling or that burden. And for me, just talking about it and doing everything I can to educate someone to help someone else in the future.
And why at this point in your journey did you decide to be so vocal about living with lupus?
I decided to be so vocal about having lupus because it's a part of my testimony. It also helps me talking about it, getting it out there, not being ashamed of it. I had Bill Bellamy, a relative of his, called me the other day and said, Tony, I've had the same exact symptoms you're having. Do you think I have the same type of lupus? I'm like, I can't diagnose that, but go to the doctors, go to your physician, get checked out. She said, I can't figure it out. It's been 10 years of this, just like you. Like, that sunshine, that ray is going to come through. Never stop believing that you can get better.
And I would say, what encourages you most in your fight against lupus and kind of moving forward like you have been doing? What is your biggest encouragement, your biggest motivation?
It's going to sound my biggest motivation are people like Penny, who just asked me that question, and I'm able to help her. I'm able to give an answer. I can help. It may not be the answer that the doctor will give her, but I can motivate her to go to the physician. Go get yourself checked out, to find a doctor that works for you. Go to Renia, go online, look up things, educate yourself. That makes me feel really good.
And get to the doctor,
Do
the tests like you've been doing.
Do all the tests.
Because I know different types of organ, I know the audience, they talked about organ involvement today.
Yes.
And that you've had various types of organ involvement, including your kidneys.
Yeah.
So I guess for that, what's the most important message you could give people?
I could give people the important message, go to the doctors. I know you don't feel like it. I know you're like, you want me to go again? I just went 2 years ago. Not good enough. Okay. If you could go annually starting, and then from there, if you get diagnosed with lupus or lupus nephritis, every 3 months is so important. I promise you, I'm a witness. I would not be sitting here today having this conversation with you or you guys out there if I had not gone to the doctors on that 3 month appointment that I had to go to, that I didn't want to go to that day. So it saved my life. So I promise you it works.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Is there any parting words? Any parting words for us today?
I just want to say thank you guys. This is wonderful. Thank you for having me. Doctors out there, thank you for all your help that you've helped me. For all the patients out there who are looking for doctors, get online. Go to urenia.com. Anybody you know doctors, refer you to a doctor. Any doctor you want to go to get it started.
Yeah.
Get it started. Just
important.
with
Get to a
simple
doctor.
blood work. And then from there, you can get, transfer to the doctors that works best for your particular ailment.
Thank you so much, Tony, for being here. We
Thank
can't thank
you
you
for
enough. Your
having
story
me.
has motivated and empowered so many people. And we're
Thank you.
so grateful for you and
Thank you so
everything that you're
much.
doing for
I
the
appreciate
community. So thank you so much. We'll turn it back to Donna. Thank you.
To public service. Shahana is the first Muslim woman elected to New York City Council and the first woman to represent the 39th District. We're very excited to have her today to share her experience. So without further ado, Shahana Hanif.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Corey, for that introduction, and the Global Healthy Living Foundation, NYU Medical Center. What an honor to join you all. Anybody here from the 39th District? I represent Park Slope, Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, Gowanus. Amazing. Windsor Terrace, a little bit of Borough Park, a little bit of Borum Hill. Lots of communities, and it's an honor today in particular to speak about my life with lupus, surviving this very tough illness. I just turned 33 this year, so this has been really most of my life at this point. This year marks 16 years with lupus, and I'm really grateful. Of course, I was very frenetic getting here late, but I'm actually really grateful that I was able to sit and listen to our physicians, listen to the patient stories, because it resonates, and that community is critical, and that's really what served as a catalyst for me. When I was 17, I was uninsured, and I had been experiencing a diversity of symptoms, including a severe toothache, gum inflammation, migraines, like debilitating migraines, was very sensitive to light, and swelling in my joints, and both of my feet were really swollen, and that was really what sparked that first hospital visit. At my home, but both parents migrated from Bangladesh. I'm first generation. We didn't have a routine or consistent care that was available and accessible to us. And I've never seen my parents take a day off from work. Me and my two siblings, we did not take time off from school. If we were sick, we just had to move forward and get on with our lives. And that certainly has been a factor in the kind of treatment that was, of course, absent from my home, but also broadly, it's not that simple. It wasn't just not wanting care that prevented the availability of care. It's also recognizing that limited English proficiency and the working class conditions of a community like Kensington, which is my home community, also attribute to why some communities feel alienated or abandoned by our medical system in this city. So uninsured, 17, both feet very swollen. We rushed to the emergency room, and at the time, this particular hospital is on the list of the worst public hospitals in our city. But that was our go-to. Anytime there were symptoms or illness, we would rush to the emergency room. It was during Ramadan. Both my mother and I are fasting. And about 10 hours later, I get to getting my blood pressure checked, urine tested, and everything is out of control. It's the first time that my mother and I would say our family, had to hear these just what were traumatic words to hear from a physician, that they could not let me go, that something was wrong. They needed to figure out what was causing the protein in the urine, why my blood pressure was so high. I was getting questions I'd never, ever had to respond to, neither my mother. But in that moment, recognizing that I had to also interpret for my mother. I also had to deliver, here's what this doctor is saying, as I'm hearing this news as I'm about to enter senior year of high school. I should be thinking about prom. I should be thinking about applying to colleges. I had a dream of leaving Brooklyn, leaving my hometown to live a life of independence. And all of those thoughts were what immediately took over my body. I was in that hospital for days to get a diagnosis. And, I keep thinking about how or why really it took so many days. It was days upon days, blood tests upon blood tests, and just the course of getting various tests done, blood drawn, really took a toll on my body. Eventually, a rheumatologist from another hospital, and this was a full circle moment because I was born in that hospital, arrived with a magazine titled Lupus. And the first words she said was, "You're not going to die, but you're going to need to have grit to get through this." And those were terrifying words to hear, because I had no idea, or I didn't know that I could have grit, or what grit would require in the days and years to come. Now, for me, the diagnosis was very much paired with how it would be to live as a young Bangladeshi Muslim girl in Kensington, because this was going to be the first time I have to navigate our healthcare system, which was already nebulous. During the initial onset, got health insurance, and my parents, as Tony shared, were very much of the camp of not talking about this, that this would really be horrifying. And for me, I had the opposite reaction. I said, why should I be quiet about this? I can't be the only one who's impacted by transit inaccessibility, because my lupus had contributed to my immobility in those early months. And then the same thing with there being no, or or inefficient translation and interpretation services within our healthcare facilities. That why is it that we're not infuriated that there are actually these barriers preventing us from good quality care that should be universal, that should be equitable for everybody. So I didn't listen to my parents. I also felt that given that my life took this I was going through this drastic change, I needed to be able to share with my friends what was happening. Now, I knew no one with lupus. I knew no one in my friend circle with disabilities. I had never heard of or read about any protagonist in any books that I'd read up until then. So I was like, this cannot be the way society functions. And so I started a blog called Shahana with Lupus to just detail, and that was what was comfortable for me, to be able to share how my days were going. And initially, why that writing was sparked was because I was rejected for paratransit services. And that really accumulated to a blog and a space to be able to authentically share how difficult it is for an average New Yorker, young New Yorkers, and English proficient New Yorkers to be able to access city services. And so as I'm detailing my navigation of city services that I need to get to college, that I need to get to my doctor's appointments, eventually work, were somehow far from me and far from access. And I was also sharing how how friendships were changing. So the blog was an impetus and a catalyst for my activism. And over the last 16 years, I've really lived a life of pride. I have been really fortunate to be able to use my voice to fight for an anti-racist feminist democracy. I believe our democracy must be representative, and I, took a page out of my organizing and decided to run for office in 2021. And I was very open about lupus. I was very open about the challenges of candidates with illness and disabilities. My journey has been 2 hip replacements over the last 10 years. I just got my left hip replaced again at the start of my term in 2022. Just as we started working, I took office, and gratefully, we were on Zoom. So being under the knife, also having my left shoulder replaced, I'm somebody who is proactively continuing to see doctors and continuing to battle the challenges of missing appointments, taking my medications, navigating not having a PCP, but having a very wonderful rheumatologist, a nephrologist, and the whole team of physicians and care. But I've been able to fight equally for telework access and expanding our telework opportunities. And that fight for me, of course, is not new, but I was so grateful that COVID, of course, not grateful for COVID, but grateful for the advocacy that emerged to really redefine how we work and how we think about productivity. And then expanding our policy around long COVID study and research. We really need to make sure that we have clinical trials that lupus patients have access to, because we need new medications. We need state-of-the-art research that is meeting our unique needs. And as a result of really wanting to see that expanded, I've gone to the White House. I've done lobby days for lupus. And actually this month is enshrined in the New York City Council and in our city as Lupus Awareness Month. So I am also equally talking about lupus with my colleagues. They have seen me really bring together this conversation about disability justice, about equity in the conversation about housing affordability and housing dignity and immigrant rights and advancing and expanding language access, fighting for workers' protections beyond just telework. We've got so many workers who, if they're sick, they're ineligible for paid sick leave. So I've got a piece of legislation that would expand paid sick time for gig workers. So there's so much to think about beyond just the lupus patient and our relationship with the medical institution and our care team, because we live in the city. We want to contribute to the city, and there's so many challenges in navigating the city. So I am deeply, deeply honored to be here. I don't get to do this enough, but I love meeting lupus warriors, and I love meeting young women in particular who don't fear being vulnerable. And that's the message that I have. The vulnerability is important for us. I want a city that is rooted in care and compassion. And so many physicians, so many nurses, so many medical care workers helped me get to this place. I won my re-election. I have another election coming up. And it's an honor to be able to use this voice and this mic in this particular way. So thank you so much for extending the invitation to me. And I really look forward to just staying connected, because this is a huge priority for my life. Lupus has contributed to the way I think about my community, myself, my relationships, every single legislation that I put forward, every single budget item that I look at. These are all for me interconnected, and also caring for one another is the greatest gift. It doesn't take any extra talent to extend care, empathy, and compassion. So thank you all so much for the work that you do. Thank you for your care and your presence. And I, again, just look forward to being a champion here with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You are amazing. Your work is amazing. And speaking of amazing, I now would like to bring forward someone that I've actually quoted several times in the health equity work that I do, from the Lupus Foundation of America, the Vice President of Research, Dr. Joy Bui.
I think I need to stand up here, or can you guys see me okay? Down here? Okay, good. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to share this platform with so many patients, as well as my wonderful colleagues. I would like to thank the organizers for having me today, and I'm excited to be a part of this program. So I actually have my own story with living with lupus. And this month, I celebrate 20 years of living after the diagnosis. And at the time that I was diagnosed, I had no idea that there were people who are sitting in this very room who was working on my behalf to make sure that I would have a future and a hope. So to Dr. Askanase, I say thank you for all the incredible work that you've done. To Dr. Jill Bayon, you are a force to be reckoned with. I enjoy your passion and your presence every week that we get to have conversations about the work that we do together. And to all the other physicians in the room, I would just like to say on behalf of the lupus community, thank you. So today we gather at the commencement of Lupus Awareness Month as we stand at the intersection of progress and perseverance. Not long ago, the word lupus often elicited blank stares, shrouded in mystery and misunderstanding. For those diagnosed, it wasn't merely a medical condition, it was a daunting sentence of limited life expectancy, deferred dreams, and unanswered questions. That's why in the 1980s, leaders at the Lupus Foundation of America helped to initiate Lupus Awareness Month with the objective of disseminating medically sound information, increasing public understanding, and providing support and hope to people living with lupus. And this month, on May 10th, we joined nearly 200 organizations globally in over 90 countries in 6 continents to commemorate World Lupus Day in our role as the Secretary of the World Lupus Federation. For the past 10 years, the World Lupus Federation has worked together to highlight lupus as a worldwide health issue affecting people of all races and ethnicities. Although we've made progress, access to care remains a formidable barrier, especially for those relying on Medicaid, where delays in specialty care can be agonizing. For those relying on Medicaid, the journey to see a specialist can stretch over months, and today we heard even years. It can lead to exacerbation of the condition and even death. But amidst these challenges, a beacon of hope shines bright that is so visible during Lupus Awareness Month, where researchers, healthcare professionals, nonprofit organizations, policymakers, federal agencies, and people impacted by lupus come together to do their part to make a positive impact for those living with this disease. Through programs of education, research, advocacy, and support services, our team at the Lupus Foundation of America is certainly working to do our part. We've secured over $684 million in federal funding and funded more than 500 research programs. Our approach is not just about addressing symptoms, advancing research for more treatments, and ultimately finding cures. Oh no, it's about empowering individuals, restoring dignity, and ensuring that no one fights this battle alone. That's why we've created a National Resource Center on Lupus, where vital educational content reaches over 8 million people annually. We provide lupus patients with one-on-one counseling, which in turn serves as a lifeline of support and promotes equitable access to treatment. We've accelerated efforts to shorten the time to diagnosis and contributed to the development of 3 new FDA-approved treatments for lupus. Through initiatives like Research Accelerated by You, which is our patient and caregiver registry, and through our journal, Lupus Science and Medicine, which is edited by Dr. Jill Bayon, we offer open access to the latest research for rheumatologists and primary care physicians. However, we recognize that the enormity of lupus cannot be managed without collaborative efforts across the lupus community. By joining forces with the Lupus Research Alliance through the Lupus Accelerating Breakthroughs Consortium, we support efforts to accelerate patient-focused drug development. By working with Lupus and Allied Diseases Association, we're able to help people with lupus across the lifespan live better lives. But our collective work is far from over. As we stand on the precipice of possibility, let us recommit ourselves to the cause. Let us amplify our voices, ignite change, and pave the way for a future where lupus is no longer a death sentence, but a chapter in a life filled with promise. We must continue the fight, because if we don't, people living with lupus who are on Medicaid will continue to have the highest mortality rates amongst all lupus patients because of a lack of access to adequate care. If we don't continue the fight, we'll continue to hear stories like the councilwoman's who had a difficult time getting access to care that she needed at the beginning of her journey. So my call to action for each of you today is simple yet powerful. Get involved. Whether it's supporting efforts to push for acceptance of Medicaid in clinics across the state of New York, joining advocacy efforts to ensure access to care, volunteering your time with nonprofit organizations like the Lupus Foundation of America, participating in clinical trials, or simply spreading awareness, every action, no matter how small, brings us one step closer to a life free of lupus. I'm sure the individuals who started the Lupus Foundation of America in 1977, as well as Lupus Awareness Month, couldn't have imagined the progress that we get to enjoy today. What will people filling these seats 50 years from now say about us? Will they say we've taken action? Will they say we finally saw the cruel mystery of lupus? Together, we can. As I take my seat, I'll leave you with these words from Nelson Mandela. Health cannot be a question of income. It is a fundamental human right. Thank you for being here today.
I guess I have to stand on this. We're about to reach the end of our program for today, but one of the things I'd like to leave you with, we'd all like to leave you with, is we mentioned several times that it takes a village. We mentioned several times that everybody plays a role. We need to improve access to care, access to medication. We need to make sure that everybody understands in the healthcare community that everyone plays a role. When you're thinking about our healthcare providers, we really need to encourage that healthcare providers, get partner, communicate, collaborate, make sure that your other specialists understand, as Dr. Saxena and Dr. Askanase said, prioritize the sickest patients, and you can only do that when you communicate. Make sure your patients are educated. The call to action, again, is for everybody, for our healthcare payers, for our policymakers. Keep doing the great work you're doing and promoting equity by bringing forward the policies that help open up access. When it comes to our advocacy groups, keep doing the great work you're doing, providing the education and the support, the advocacy that's needed. And for people living with chronic diseases like lupus, let's make sure that we are our own best advocates, that we fight to make sure that we have the access to the care, to the medications, to the services that we need to be well. And that means equity for everyone, equity for all. With that, I'd like to bring back up Burgess just for one last thank you to everybody that was involved.
I would just like to thank everyone for all the hard work and time and effort, and all of the partners, UCB, and Donna, by the way, just a partner in crime in putting this together. Just a heartfelt thanks to her. Biogen, Health First, the Lupus Research Alliance, Global Healthy Living Foundation, and our media partner and just partner in general, blackdoctor.org, for the live stream, Arinia and Tony Braxton for taking time out of her schedule to support us, even though she was in LA. So thank you, one and all. Thank you for all the work you do, all the healthcare providers and physicians and who supported this effort as well. So we look forward to taking this and what we did here today and building on it and building on the community that exists, and bringing more people into the fold. And as it was said earlier, it does take a village, and we appreciate everyone being in this village and under this tent in order to be able to advance what's taking place in lupus so that we can make that patient journey better for minority, marginalized, hard to reach, underserved populations. So thank you all.
We forgot
And
one. A special thank you to NYU, Ranit, especially.
Yes, that's
This would not have happened without you and without the support of NYU. We're honored to be here today and look forward to doing this again next year.
That's right. Thank you very much. Thank you.